All right, so we're going to be talking about positive and negative values and adding positive and negative values, and whether we get a positive or negative value out of this. And this can be kind of confusing people initially, but there's certainly definitely a method to it, and there's really no madness. Okay, so we start. I like to write these out in the beginning because it helps us understand. It gives a general overview of our positive and our negative values, okay, what they are and how they wind up. So I say a positive value plus another positive value is always going to give me a positive value. And there's a corresponding scenario where I start with a positive value and I subtract a negative value that's also always going to give me a positive value. All right, this one makes sense to us. This one maybe not so much. We're going to show you why soon. Okay. I may start with a positive value. Okay. If I add a negative value, I don't know whether my end value will be positive or if it will be negative. Conversely, if I start with a positive, I subtract another positive. Okay. This is the same scenario. So adding a negative is the same thing as subtracting a positive. And this scenario, positive plus a negative or negative minus a positive, we don't know whether the result will be positive or negative without knowing the actual values involved. All right. Let's start with a positive. This is addition. Okay. Sorry. So we're going to start with a negative value. Excuse me. We're going to start with a negative value. Okay. And we're going to add a positive value. I don't know what the result will be. If I start with a negative value and I subtract a negative value, I also don't know what the result is going to be. A positive plus a positive is the same as a negative plus a negative. Now we look at a negative minus a negative and we think, well, that must always be negative, but no, we don't know what it's going to be. However, if we have a negative, we add a negative, that's always going to be negative. If we have a negative and we subtract a positive, that will also always give us a negative. Okay? So this is a good thing to remember, because if you know this down pat like the back of your hand, it's really going to help you with your mathematics. But just because we did this, you might early on or even later on get confused. You have to orientate yourself and figure out, how do I do that? So I'm going to show you now what is the basic math behind it, why it works the way it works. Give us kind of an intuitive sense of what is going on here. All right. Well, before we do that, let's do one thing quickly. So if I have positive 4 plus a positive 2, okay, very quickly, this particular sign right here, this is the operand, okay? It's the operand. All right, it's going to be plus or minus, or times or divided by. But in this case, we're only doing adding and subtracting. So the operand is going to be plus or minus. This is the sign, okay? It's positive or negative, okay? The operand is plus or minus. The sign is positive or negative. So it's incorrect to say plus minus 2. Okay, this is plus negative 2. All right, so we've got that. So we're going to want to understand. Let's go back here. We're going to start with here, okay? So we're going to have a number line, all right? And I've got a Maserati here. Isn't that nice? I got a Maserati. Vroom, 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 Maserati. All right. So, and we're going to use this to figure out an intuitive sense of how number lines work. All right. So let's start with a positive 2 plus a positive 4. We remember from initially that a positive plus a positive is always going to give us a positive number. Let's see if that's the case. We know it's already the case, but let's look at how it works on this number line. Okay. Think of it this way. This number right here is where I start. Where I start. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to start at positive 2. Okay. Positive 2 on the number line is where I'm going to start. Think of this number right here as the direction of my car. Okay. So positive means my car is pointed in the positive direction. And the operand, car's direction, and the operand, that's going to equal drive, which is plus, or reverse, which is minus. Okay? Operands, drive or reverse. So you can use this case, my starting point is positive 2. My car is in is plus, so it's pointing in the positive direction, and the operand is plus, so it says to drive. So my car is in drive, and I'm pointing in the positive direction. Well, I'm going to start at 2. I'm going to move 4 units in the positive direction to positive 6. And now we kind of see that if I'm in drive and I'm pointing in this direction, I'm always going to be traveling in this direction. I'm always going to be traveling in the positive direction. Okay? Always traveling in the positive direction. I'm starting at a positive point. Start at a positive point and move in the positive direction. I'm always going to wind up on the. I can't get to the negative side of the number line. I'm always going to wind up on the positive side of the number line, and that's why you can intuitively see that a positive plus a positive is always a positive. All right. Well, what about our other example? A positive minus a negative. Plus 2 minus a negative 4. We said this was these two are the same thing. Positive 2 minus negative 4 and positive 2 plus positive 4 are actually the same thing. This is positive 6. All right. So let's look at this. Is that the case? Well, these are the same thing. We're going to take our car. Our car is going to be at positive 2. All right. But it's pointed in the negative direction. Pointed in the negative direction. Okay. So we're pointed this way. Okay. Negative direction. But we're going to go in reverse. Whoa. Well, if I'm pointing in this direction, by going in reverse, I'm always going to go this way, right? If I'm pointing this way, I'm in reverse. My car is going to go in reverse. So I'm going to start at positive 2. I'm going to back up 4 units to positive 6. So you can see in this case, with our car, even though because we're pointing in the negative direction, but we're in reverse, we're also going to go in the positive direction. And again, we're starting on the positive side of the number line, moving in the positive direction. You can't wind up in the negative side of the number line doing that. So that's why they put negative. Positive minus a negative is always going to be a positive. All right. Negative 3 plus a negative 4. We said before that a negative plus a negative is always a negative, which is also equal to a negative minus a positive. Okay. So a negative 3 plus negative 4. Okay. Well, I'm going to start out at negative 3 on my number line, and my car's going to be pointed in the negative direction. Okay. So I'm at negative 3. My car's pointed in the negative direction. Okay. I'm going to drive. My car is always going to be traveling. If I'm driving, I'm traveling in the negative direction. I'm going to wind up at negative 7. Okay. And so we can see we're starting at a negative point. We always start at a negative point. And we're pointing in the negative direction in drive, or adding. Okay. We're always going to be moving in the negative direction. And so we're always going to wind up. We're starting at the negative side of the number line. We're traveling away from the positive side. We're traveling more farther into the negative zone, negative side of the number line. We will always have a negative number. Okay. We also said this is the same thing as a negative 3 minus a positive 4, right? Well, in this case, I'm at negative 3. Negative 3. I'm pointed in the positive direction, but I'm going to be in reverse. My car's in reverse. So if I'm pointing this way, but I'm going in reverse, I'm still traveling in the negative direction on the number line. Negative 3, I'm going to back up 4 units to positive 7, okay? Sorry, to negative 7, okay? So you can see that adding a negative, whether I add a negative or subtract a positive, I'm still traveling, I'm starting on the negative side, and I'm traveling in the negative direction, so my number's always going to be negative. So a positive plus a positive is always a positive. Positive minus a negative is always a positive. A negative plus a negative is always negative, and a negative minus a positive is always negative. And in the next video I will deal with the other scenarios that we talked about.